It takes valor to identify your breaking points and refuse to allow people or circumstances to use them to force you to say or do things you don't believe. And the second is by Cole Harmonson from a book called Pre-Middle Age. It takes effort to say no when our heart and brains and guts, and most important, pride, are yearning to say yes. Practice. Our chalice lighting was picked by Jeremiah Veach, and there he is. He is going to read it, and I will light the chalice.
This is by Edgar Allan Poe. It's my favorite saying, and I'd like to hear what you guys think. The boundaries which divide life from death are best left shadowy and vague. Who shall say where the one ends and where the other begins?
And now I'd like to introduce our speaker, friend, minister, Karen Van Fossan, who I'm so grateful for her presence as a minister. We've been lay-led for so very many years, and when we had previous ministers, I was just new to it and didn't quite understand the need for such a being. And it's just a real gift to have her here, and I'm personally very grateful for her friendship and her ministry. So please welcome Karen Van Fossan.
My dad was a definite football jock, with a glimmer in his eye that we would affectionately call ornery in my family. He used to say his position was tight end. You never really outgrow body humor where I'm from. My dad, with a buzz cut, a school jacket to this day still smells just like every other high school football school jacket I've ever smelled, and a fair share of attitude, was sometimes left defensive end and sometimes left offensive guard for the mighty MacArthur Generals in Decatur, Illinois. He texted me the cheer the other day, and I promise you the word mighty was in there a lot. I never got a chance to be a football jock myself. We'll come back to that later. But I did pay attention when my brother, at about age 8, used to all but disappear under that heavy football padding and that extremely endearing helmet. As far as I can tell, football, like any other form of dance, is all about no. It's possible because of no. I don't mean the rules of the game or the strategies. They're not any particular strategy. But football is possible because there's empty space in the world. Negative space, as they say in other forms of dance. There has to be a space that isn't filled with something else for there to be a space where you can play football. So, at this time, I invite my football volunteers to come forward. So, as they play football, as they play football, we can see their space around them. Above their heads, beneath their arms, behind their knees. The negative space around them is not filled. If it was filled, they couldn't play football there. This negative space, the non-use of space around them, the emptiness, the no, let's not do this other thing here, all give them room to move, to play, and to say yes to football. In that room, that space, many things are possible. Thank you. So I don't know if football plays are really marked out with those lines and X's like they would have on the Brady Bunch, but that helps illustrate the concept. So all that space around is the empty space, the no space, that makes those lines and X's possible, the yes. But I was never a football star myself. I was never on the team, and I never really even got as far as wanting to be on the team. Not even those little rapscallion teams that would come together on our block sometimes. Football was, for me, in a way, negative space. except for an relatively brief period of highly audible school spirit, football took up very little space in my life, especially after my brother gave up his endearing football helmet for an equally endearing baseball cap. I said no to football like I said no to a lot of things, like all of us say no to a lot of things. The absence of football gave me space. After living in a couple of major and minor cities, Chicago, Illinois, and Boulder, Colorado, I learned that oftentimes people love to be in a place that is absolutely teeming with things they are not doing. On any given night, there's so much to say no to in Chicago. Theater you can't attend, concerts you can't get to, sporting events that conflict, meetings out of your reach. Most people in Chicago on any given night are not doing most of the things there are to do in Chicago. Here in Bismarck Mandan, on those nights when there's so much going on that I can't attend it all, I'm enlivened by the possibilities. This is what saying no, making a choice, which we do all the time, does for us. It creates a fertile space by honoring the reality that not all spaces can be fertile for us, and not all spaces should be fertile for us. No is the night to the yes of day. With too much yes, we don't get rest. We don't get the recuperation that each of our bodies need. We probably even get some light pollution with too much yes, claiming the space of darkness. This is what we learned in seminary to call a faith claim. This is my claim about how I understand the universe, or at least the world, and how I believe Unitarian Universalism understands the world. The earth has limits. I have limits. We each have limits. Whether we believe in God or not in this community, it's an important agreement we make that not a one of us is the God. Not a one of us can survive beyond the limits of human survival. An attentiveness to no, even a practice of no, when well placed, puts us in direct solidarity with the planet, even when we're not addressing environmental concerns directly. Resources are finite. Goods are finite. That's not a complaint. That's a keen understanding of what is, a keen appreciation, which comes from being rooted in the real live earth. This is what the Jewish Sabbath is all about, saying no to work for one day of the week, saying no to production, which makes the yes of pleasure and rest possible. A sudden period of rest, when we're accustomed to putting in long hours, throwing ourselves into a project for work or community or family, can be frightening and confusing. Anyone here who's ever lost a job or left a job, been laid off, had a sudden day off after many days of push, faced the initial shock of retirement, graduated from the known world of school into an unknown future, cared for a loved one who then died, fought for a relationship that then ended, put everything you've got into a cause or a piece of legislation or a referendum that passed, or maybe it didn't, has probably been there. Who am I when I'm face to face with new negative space? What do I do in the absence of the yes that has defined me? How do I act? How do I even feel about myself or my world? It takes guts to be in this space, the mystery, the unknown, where something could grow, but it isn't growing yet, and you don't even know what it is, maybe, or whether you want to pull it out by the roots or let it bloom. This is why I believe we need no as a practice. Meditation, prayer, quiet time, whatever you choose to call it. We need facility with negative space, with emptiness, hollowness, potential, with the absence of action or even ideas. We need to allow ourselves solidarity with the dirt where nothing has grown yet, the water that hasn't reached its destination yet, the air that hasn't made it around the world yet, the fire that burns right now in the moment. I invite you to take a pause with me right now. I invite you to place your soles of your feet on the floor, if that's possible. To rest your hands on your thighs, palms up or palms down. To close your eyes or soften your gaze. To take a deep breath. Another deep breath. And another deep breath. I invite you just to be here, to be in a practice of no. No actions, no thoughts, no plans, no ideas. To be empty, which makes you ready to be filled with new life. To be closed from too much stimulation, which makes you ready to be open to what's next. To be free from expectation, which makes you ready to respond to what is needed later on. I invite you now into one moment of silence. When you're ready, I invite you to open your eyes or refocus your gaze, to take another deep breath. Stretch a little if you like in your seat. I invite you today and other times of your choosing to participate in this fast for your mind and your body and your senses. This practice of no can change us. It can also change the world. Rosa Parks said no, or as the popular t-shirt put it, nah. She was already an activist with the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. She had lived with segregation in Montgomery, Alabama. She'd drunk from water fountains marked for coloreds only, taken separate elevators, attended separate schools, stood at the back of the bus, even when there was room at the front. She'd witnessed a black man being beaten by a white bus driver for no discernible reason. She'd seen black churches and schools go up in flames, torched by the Ku Klux Klan. Then, as we heard in the story this morning, on December 1st, 1955, a bus driver told her to stand so a white man could sit. Maybe she said no or nah, or maybe after a hard day's work, she just sat there looking at a sparrow out the window. Rosa was soon arrested, charged with breaking a segregation law. She was given a fine of $10, which is about $90 today. She refused to pay it. She said she wasn't guilty. She didn't do anything illegal. The law was illegal. This practice of no was followed by many other practices of no. The boycott of the buses lasted for over a year. I didn't realize quite how long it was. And it ended finally when the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that segregation laws in Alabama were unconstitutional. Somewhere Rosa Parks learned or taught herself that too much yes can mean too much status quo. And when that status quo is unjust, too much injustice. Young children figure out how to communicate no. We learned it too at about 2 or 3. Some of us are nodding in very knowing ways. This capacity to say no, to embody no, is what every movement for social change requires. The women who sang for bread and roses said no to unsafe factory conditions and low pay. The members of this congregation who initiated a welcoming church process decades ago said no to religious discrimination against LGBTQ people, period. The children who say no to a hug or a kiss or a tickle need to be supported in this learning. My social media world was full this week, maybe yours was too, of stories by women and girls we know and care about who've been openly groped in public in this town. There are no doubt men and boys who have such stories. These boundary crossings, these kinds of injustices, seek to overpower the no of another person, behaving as if the person touched has no space for no and no right to it. When we let our children refuse or end a hug or a kiss or a tickle, even from our very favorite grandma and our super funny Uncle so-and-so, or their loving siblings or their well-meaning peers, we teach children two things. People get to have some agency over their bodies, which includes one, themselves, and two, other people. When we get to say at any age who can hug or kiss or tickle us, and when and for how long. In the Poetry of Life, as Liz Anderson and I selected music for the service with the help of Jean King, as always, we happened upon an image. Bread and roses, I know this rose will open. It's even in Rosa Parks' name. The relationship between no and yes is not only negative space and football motion, dark and light, potential and fullness. It's also thorns and blossoms. Sometimes at the florist we can find roses with the thorns courteously snipped off. I like my roses with the thorns on. You can't grab it just because you like it. You can't squash it just because you don't like it. I get to say no, and so do you, and so do we together. This is how we are mighty, whether we ever played for the mighty MacArthur Generals in Decatur, Illinois, or not. Thank you.